Williams.
Kia ora, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, in February I had the pleasure of travelling to Rarotonga to attend the United Nations Development Partners meeting. And they had an award ceremony one of the nights that they were there. And during the award ceremony, they made an award to my uncle, Mr Tekake William. Tekake William is a pioneer of the black pearl industry. And many of the people from this house who have travelled to the Cook Islands know that the black pearl is one of the major components of the economy in the Cooks. My father, Nahora William, used to travel back to the Cooks to help his younger brother, work in the pearl farm in the early days. My father, when he retired, would do so a couple of months every year, would travel to the Cooks. He would winter up there. And he would be very pleased to know that we are putting this bill through the House and it will be passed tonight, because portability was important to him. He didn't have the opportunity to access the portability that is now being afforded. So in that regards, today is a very important day because the bill will be passed and afford the opportunity to many people that my father didn't have. My father, I should also say, used to travel to the Cooks and leave my mother behind, but that's a whole other issue. Mr Speaker, portability is important because, as my colleague Carmel Sepuloni said, one of the unintended consequences of being part of the countries of the realm of New Zealand, travelling on a New Zealand passport, is depopulating of the home islands. We are able to travel freely as people of the realm to New Zealand, and we have done so, not only to New Zealand but also to Australia. So the portability bill is an attempt, I guess, to support the travel home, support the return home of people in order that they contribute to the economy of their home islands. But what's difficult about it, and we've traversed this well and truly across the House in the course of the passage of this bill, has been the difficulty around the residency clause after the age of 50. So 12 of the 13 submitters were very clear that they felt the opportunity to make a significant difference to the economy of the Cooks, to the population of the Cooks. For example, I speak from the example of the Cooks because I have personal knowledge of this, that actually is a huge barrier. The opportunity that my father, for example, may have had to go back and actually start a pearl farm of his own, should he have been able to do so, cannot be afforded to him. And there are many people who are currently in the countries of the realm who will have to return to do that 5-year residency. So it is blatantly unfair when we have portability arrangements with other countries that don't have that as a provision. It is unfair. We had the benefit of having the Honourable Henry Puna, the Honourable Nandi Glassie and the Premier Tarangi from Niue here to present. And the very fact that we had two heads of state and a government minister from overseas country come and present to our select committee should have been recognised for the value that it brought. They were coming to plead their case, and that unfortunately fell on a couple of deaf ears. Also, the hard work by the Mātua group, and I have to acknowledge the group that in Christchurch, led by Mama Tufunga and Papa John Pitumaki, who were very impassioned in their submission and quoted the sacrifice that they felt that they and people, their families who had come before them, had given to this country. And I have also already in this House talked about the 500 soldiers from the Cook Islands who fought for New Zealand under the New Zealand flag during World War I. And what has that afforded to us? And in this bill, it has demonstrated that that sacrifice has been for nothing. I also want to commend the submission made by the Christian Church in Christchurch by Mrs. Tere Moana McNabb. She too spoke quite passionately about the residency requirement post age 50 and how unequal that made her feel as a Cook Islander, but living in New Zealand. But there was hope. There was hope in the form of the SOP that was put up by New Zealand First, which was supported by us. It was a good SOP and it was an attempt to redress inequality that exists within this bill. And after the committee stages, as my colleague Carmel Sepuloni has said, I was canvassed quite heavily by members of the Cook Island community to ask, what now? What now? What can we do now? And unfortunately for this bill, that is it. We will not actually be able to demonstrate our commitment to our Cook Island, Niue and Tokelau community as we would have hoped by saying, yes, your sacrifice, your hard work, the lives of your ancestors does mean something to New Zealand. Yes, we will actually bring you in line with portability arrangements with other countries who don't have the same special arrangements. But in this case, Mr. Speaker, we can't say that. I also have to acknowledge the RSA submitter who made a very clear case that when you receive a war pension, that is not the same as a superannuation. He wanted it on record, he wanted it noted that someone who puts their lives at risk in service of this country should be recognised differently to someone who receives a pension because it is they have been a taxpayer and it is the age of eligibility that triggers that. And I want to acknowledge that RSA submitter and say, yes, I agree that someone who does put their lives on the line for their country should be treated in a different way and acknowledged in a different way. And superannuation and more pensions should be treated separately. So I acknowledge the work that you've done. So I say to all of those people, and there will be one or two who are watching the third reading of this, we did try. We tried really hard. And we did our best, and it hasn't come to fruition as you would have hoped. But we all know that there is one person that we can point to on the other side of the house who could have stood up for you and chose not to. That someone who could have petitioned his colleagues and talked about his own family experience, but chose not to. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to belabour the rest of this bill. I'm pleased the provisions that we are passing in this bill, and it will make it possible for some people to have the opportunities that they may not have had prior. But at the end of the day, it doesn't do what was promised by Mr. McCulley all those years ago, and for that I'm very disappointed. Kia ora ana, mai taki mata.